policy. So I wanted to kind of get your take on that, especially as both an immigrant and somebody who is working in the government level. What your thoughts are on that?
I think that the answer varies, right? I mean, on many levels, you have to. The first question about not fully understanding the process. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that when we come into the United States, I mean, even the second question, both questions, it has a lot to do with the fact when we come to the United States, for the most of us, our main priority is to get a job or go to school. Those are the reasons why we come. And when you apply the theory of the hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which suggests that our priorities are food and shelter. When we come in, we focus on food and shelter, going to work, feed our family, or going to school. Along with those two things come with the fact that we also, even though we are leading a life here, we also have another family back home that we're taking care of, which leaves very little time for things like activism, volunteering, different things. I mean, I remember there were times where I wanted to volunteer in so many different causes, but regardless of how much I wanted to do it, I didn't have time because I was always working a job here, 2 jobs there. When I'm not working, there's always something else to do. So I don't think it's the fact that we don't want to, but a lot of it has to do with the fact that we have so many things that we are worried about on a day-to-day basis that we have to meet first. Work, school, kids, family back home, right? When you go past that stage, you get to the point where activism, lobbying requires a group effort. And to be honest with you, we're just not as organized as everybody. I mean, you saw during the testimony, the Latino community is very organized. The Jewish community is very organized. Within the African community, we each try to do things on our own. The Gambians want to do things on their own. Mali wants to do things on their own. Senegal wants to do things on their own. And we each focus on things that are going on in our own country. We rarely see, like the issue with Boko Haram, we barely see Senegalese community go join forces with the Nigerian community to make an impact. We just want to focus on what's going on around us, right? Which means that we are weaker, right? And that's the reason why you don't see a lot of Africans involved in the immigration debate. You don't see us. I mean, I spoke about this on April 4th. I spoke to the Senegalese community, and one of the things that I mentioned was that we have to go to the information. We cannot just sit and wait for the government to come to us. We have to lobby our government. When we want things done, we have to write letters, we have to send emails, we have to rally in front of office buildings. We have to organize and send emails to talk about the issues that affect us. So I'm not sure where the answer lies, but those are just the challenges that make us harder for us to be involved in the process, lobby our government, and just try to make an impact.
Sure. To your first question, though, as far as having to deal with work and home and then having families back home, I mean, isn't that what any immigrant deals with? I mean, same for if they come from Mexico or same if they come from Vietnam.
That's true. But I think the fact that even though most immigrants have to deal with the same thing, but with Africa is a little bit different. I mean, we take the family that we leave back home is still very personal to us. So when we come here, regardless of how much money or whatever we do, we still got to take care of another family back home. You add another factor to that is the fact that some of us are undocumented. And even though the Latino community, there are also many that are undocumented, but with us, there's this idea of a stigma that's involved with being undocumented, that when we are undocumented, we're not supposed to do certain things. We're not supposed to go join rallies because they'll find us and they'll take us back home. When we are undocumented, we don't want to go to the hospital, right? Because we don't have any papers and we risk being discovered and being documented. So there's a fear factor that's involved with the African community. And most of that is due to the fact that Latino immigrants have more experience in immigration than we do. We just came here from 1980s, so we're not as experienced, right, to say when it comes to those certain things. So we rather just not deal with it. There's another aspect to that is that this is something that I thought is that most of us, when we come here, we are successful. We don't want to be involved with like the small people, right? We have a job that pays very well. We have a nice house, so we're just going to stay in our own corners. Why even bother hanging out with those people, right? Because they're not on our level, and I think that's not a good idea to have when it comes to Africans. So the issues are numerous, and they all sort of hinder our process and our progress.
From your perspective as somebody who has worked in the government, specifically on the Commission of African Affairs, what would you say are kind of effective strategies for getting change? And what have you seen kind of from the inside that those on the outside need to do and can do?
I think a number of things can be done. For one, we have to clearly identify and we have to clearly identify our problems as immigrants, as African immigrants. You cannot lobby your government if they don't know what the issues. So we have to identify the issues that we face, first of all. Second of all, you have to be able to organize within a community and be one community instead of being a different number of communities, like fractions of communities. You have to become one African community, not Malian community, not Nigerian. We have to become one community. And the second thing, you have to be able to use that organization to approach those leaders and lobby your government, because lobbying is a very important part of the political process. So once you identify your issues, once you organize, you have to lobby. Lobbying means making phone calls, requesting meetings with lawmakers to sit and talk to them about your issues. Lobbying means marching down, rallies, marching, protesting. I mean, all of those writing, websites to share white papers on different issues. So all of that is part of, and also we have to be involved in the political process. When there are elections, we have to be able to, make donations to these campaigns, right? Look, because along with donation come with opportunity to highlight your problems. And when those guys get elected, you visit them again. You remind them of their promises, and you keep them accountable. So the process goes from A to Z, but the most important thing is being organized and identifying the issues. Right?
Now, from your perspective, you mentioned a little bit, say, undocumented workers, undocumented
Immigrant.
Africans. Are there any kind of issues that you see that could be or should be priorities for African immigrants?
The priorities are
Specifically African.
the priorities are numerous. When it comes to health, African immigrants are the healthiest among all immigrant groups. But there are large disparities in our community. Even though we are the healthiest, issues like HIV/AIDS, cancer, especially among women, breast cancer, are devastating. I did a study where in DC alone, I think 36% of African women who were 40 years and older said they never had a mammogram. But those issues are issues that we have to bring to the table. Another issue that I think we have is when you try to find information about African immigrants, it's very tough, because when you take myself and 10 other African Americans, when we fill out the form, we check the one box, which is black or African American, which means that whenever you hear information like 25% of African Americans have such and such, more than likely it's wrong, because that number includes African immigrants. So there have to be an effective data collection process in order to be able to tell what percentages of African immigrants have certain diseases. The Kaiser Family Foundation said that there were no precise data on African immigrants when it comes to HIV/AIDS, which is a problem, right? And a lot of that is because we are included as part of the black or African immigrants. That's one problem. We have language barriers. Language barrier is a major problem, in the sense that People often think that people who come from English-speaking countries don't have language barriers, and that's not true. Language barrier is a major problem in the African community. Stigma is a major problem in the African community. Stigma is stereotype, in the sense that most people sort of assume that, large number of African immigrants have HIV/AIDS, which is not true. So all of those are issues that we have. We are the most educated immigrant group, but 18% of African immigrants live below the poverty line. That's an issue. Why is that? It's only because you have the two issues of brain waste and brain drain, right? Brain waste meaning the large number of African immigrants who leave Africa and come to the United States, depriving African countries of, resources. But when we come here, we face the issues of brain waste, in the sense that a large number of people come here, very educated, PhDs, doctors, lawyers, back home. When we come here, our degrees aren't being recognized by the U.S. system. So you find a lot of time people that come here from Somalia, for example, very educated, back home, doctors, you name it, but they cannot work here because they are a doctor there, but they're not a doctor here. So what they end up doing is they end up driving cabs just to meet certain things temporarily, or they end up working in hotels. So you have someone who's very highly educated but working as a cab driver. That's an issue in our community, because if that person was to be able to, if there was enough resources so that that person driving a cab is maybe earning $45,000, if that person could be placed in a job where he's earning $90,000, for example, that's more tax dollars that he could be paying to the city. He can invest in a home, he could buy a nice car, he could invest in a business, but that person can't because he's underemployed. So that's a problem in our community.
Even then, that could lead to another priority issue, which is helping some of these people be able to translate, kind of matching their education to potential opportunities over here, or even kind of lobbying to try to ameliorate like those differences in recognizing degrees and
Sure.
how to, I guess, just how to navigate that.
No, there's several states are doing some very innovative things to sort of help bridge those gaps. Like New Jersey, for example, is doing a lot of efforts to make sure that to address brain waste, right? This is one of the ways they are doing it is by providing translation services. Because most of the time you have a student who comes from Senegal, wants to go to college. He's got to send his transcripts to New York, wait maybe 6 months for those transcripts to be translated and sent to the school before he can get a admission decision.
Yeah.
But in Senegal, a lot of those records aren't in a database. It takes time for you to just get it and send it. And it takes time. But meanwhile, there are things that could be done that you could take someone maybe who is a doctor in Senegal who can be placed in a job here as someone teaching medical courses or something like that.
Yeah, or
right?
just in this helping to
Or,
write paper.
or while you're waiting for your transcript to be translated, you could be admitted without a transcript for a year. Given that you'll get your transcript to school, so by the time it comes, you haven't wasted a year to just sit and wait for your transcript. So a lot of things are being done to address those gaps, but it's just the fact that there is not enough effort behind it to push it, so that lawmakers can actually can make that happen.
Okay. I want to go back to the issue of reliable data on Africans. One thing I noticed at the testimony at the council
hearing.
Yeah, the council hearing was just I heard that figure come up a lot, at least in the DC area, talking about DC. that we think that there's about 16,000. I think in your testimony you said that the number could be, anywhere upwards of 18,000 or so.
Sure.
And this was cited, I think, 2 or 3 times as a reason to why there needs to be more money. Basically, we don't know for sure how many of us there are, but yet I did not hear anybody specifically calling for money just to do a survey like that. Has that been, why is that? Has that been proposed or put before?
Actually, in the study that I did in 2011, which was the state of the Africans in a district, one of the recommendations among 5 was more research. We need to do more research. Because I think every good researcher will finish the research by asking for more research. I mean, that's just how research is done, right? So I've suggested that we need to do more research on African immigrants. Because I spent 6 months doing that research, and it took me, I had such a hard time finding data because much hasn't been done. When the Kaiser Family Foundation says that there's no precise data on African immigrants, means there's a problem when it comes to research. So that's one thing. The number about African immigrants, I think it's also due to the fact that, which is what I just mentioned, that African Americans are grouped as part of the Black African Americans.
Right.
In the census, there's no section for just African immigrants. There's just Black, white, Latino. So that's one of the reasons why we think that's one reason why that is. The second thing is that there's a chronic population undercount in all surveys, in all census. People don't want to be counted. People are afraid to be counted because of different reasons. Most are undocumented. But even in surveys, usually there are undercounts. So the number that we provided, which was 16,000 African immigrants, was based on the American Community Survey that did those samples with very high error margins. And along with that, you have the error margins, you have the known population undercount, you have the fact that most don't want to be counted. We assume that the number is much higher than that based on just those statistics.
But is it not possible to, as a specific priority in the budget for DC, to ask for funds to design a sort of, independent survey of just specifically the African immigrants? I mean, aside from the census data or whatnot, but to design some way to mobilize people to try to get an accurate count. Is that not possible?
It's possible, but but it goes back to your first question about organizing, lobbying. It's possible, but it has to be a priority for the decision makers. It has to be enough priority, or we have to do a good job at making sure that they understand the issues so they can put money behind it. It's not just about sending an email or two, but lawmakers have to understand the issue that's at hand and how it ties into other issues. So that when we say, well, not knowing the number of African immigrants is a problem, we have to be able to justify that. For example, we have to be able to argue that when agencies or when department collects health surveillance data, which are how many people have cancer or how many, we have to be able to say, well, based on these numbers, 25% of people in this list are from Ghana, 10 are from Senegal, 2 are from which country, and each one of them have statistics tied into it. For example, we have to be able to say, based on 2009 information, 2% from people from Somalia have faced this issue. But if we're not able to do that, how are we going to know what issues affect which community? For example, the Asian community. We know that stomach cancer is the more prevalent in the Asian community. But we don't know that for African community because there's no research has been done, no information has been collected to be able to justify that.
Who did the research for the Asian community themselves?
Well, the Asian community are more settled, and they don't just rely on funding from the government. They have so many different resources outside the government to fund their nonprofits, to fund their activities. Most of the African community, we have association, and we chip in $10 a month to do our own activities. So again, it has to be important for us. And then we have to make it important to lawmakers so that they can put money behind it to make sure that we do more research, collaborate with universities, collaborate with other nonprofit organizations in order to just produce white papers, researches, and come up with those recommendations.
Yeah, just because at the very basic kind of conceptual level, you have to know, you have to know how many and where the problem is before you begin to address it, and especially even kind of broadening out, just kind of thinking through this, but like broadening to the national level and international level. I mean, there's a lot of talk about remittances and diaspora,
right,
and how these groups can potentially contribute to back to Africa, and how that can be integrated into even U.S. policy, for instance. But at the very basic level, people are talking about diaspora and diaspora's contributions to the continent, and we don't even have the basic numbers to talk about or to give a picture of who they are, what they're earning, where they come from, what languages they speak. To me, a lot of times it kind of rings a little hollow sometimes. So I guess it's not so much a question, but more so, I mean, I would just think that could be or should be just one very obvious priority.
No, it would be. I mean, there's a lot of talks about diaspora issues. I mean, I hear it all the time.
I know.
The diaspora, we have so many skills, blah, blah, blah. But my point is, if we're not able to benefit from that, what good does it make to just talk about it? I mean, the World Bank released information about the diaspora contributing $50 billion, having a purchase power of $50 billion, and they estimated that within the next decade it will grow from 250 billion to 250 billion over the next decade. So that's a very heavy purchase power. But again, I think with the fact that everybody's on a corner doing things on their own, right? If we came together as we should, we could have had our own think tank here, funded by different funding sources, to do research on African immigrants, collaborate with universities, Howard University, Harvard, George Washington, that way. But I was involved in discussion to have a African community center in DC, but it didn't go far because we're not quite sure what it's supposed to look like, who's going to fund it, who's going to run it. So most of it has to do with the fact that we're not as organized.
So organization.
Organization.
Okay. But have you seen any examples or initiatives of where organization has worked, at least to a certain extent, in diaspora community?
Yeah, definitely. There are plenty. You go to Atlanta, you go to New York, you come here to DC, Maryland. People are, I don't mean to say that we're not doing a good job, but organizations are, I know of an organization that, does very well in giving, helping students get scholarships. Some are, the Ethiopian Community Center, works a lot with refugees. There are so many different examples of African communities doing great things, not just here but also back home. But that's not enough. We have to collaborate more among each other. Among groups. Wonderful work is being done. Well, you can draw example. In New York, for example, the Senegalese community there. Very involved in. I mean, if you look at in Somalia, I mean not Somalia. In I think it's Michigan. I mean, they helped elect the first congressman.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right.
It's Michigan.
Was it Michigan or
Minneapolis, right? They helped elect the first congressman. I mean, all over the United States now you see more Africans have been elected, and all of that is because there are organizations behind them, pushing them to take those leadership roles.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Would you suggest that is also one way or one area that should be explored more as far as diaspora influence? I mean, literally trying to get people into office against state.
We have to. People have to get elected. People have to be supported. They may not have the courage, but they have to be supported to push them to run for office at all levels. Obviously, if you're not born here, you can't be a president, but we have to support each other to run for office at all levels. I think it was Malcolm X who said that sitting at the table does not make you a diner. You have to be eating for what's on that plate, right? So most of us, we're just sitting at the table, but we have to be eating from what's on that plate.
I like that.
You like that? That's it?
Like the general, I mean, again, like this is me coming back into this story. So as I go through, especially this weekend,
take your time.
This weekend I want to
just
write something out. If I have like very specific questions, especially about the report, I will get. Oh, okay. Actually, that's not true. I have one more question. Can you talk a little bit more about the Commission on African Affairs here and they're doing well, and I mean not just more in general. I'm not going to necessarily
the commission,
but just for me to kind of get a sense of where the shortcomings are.
Well, I was recently nominated to the commission in January, but even before being nominated, I've worked with the commission because I've worked there. But I think the commission does a really good job of supporting the office.
The budget.
No, not the Office on African Affairs.
Office of African Affairs. Okay.
Does a really good job of supporting the office. I haven't been there long enough to know what the shortcomings are, but based on what I see, I think we have a fantastic team of people in all spectrum of society coming together with the desire of supporting the office. Obviously, there's a limit to what we can do. But even with that, obviously, you saw during the council testimony how we came together to sort of bring up those issues. And I think once we do that, I mean, we have to leave it up to decision makers to make them happen for us.
And more broadly, the Office of African Affairs, what have you seen as being the positives and the negatives?
When I started working there in 2011, the first thing that struck me when you walk in the office is how passionate everybody is about the African community. That's just undeniable. Everybody's so passionate about African issues. Everybody wants to support the office. Everybody wants to see African immigrants do well. I think that's a fantastic thing. The people that work there are people who know the issues about African immigrants, people who have been grounded in issues, people who lived in the African community, who are able to highlight those issues. And another great thing is that we come from different backgrounds, right? Some have government experience, some just came from school, some worked in nonprofits. So when you bring up all of those different, I guess, all of those perspectives, it makes it for a very interesting conversation about what and how we should be done to address those issues. I think the leadership is really great, obviously, but it takes a lot of time. You have to understand that the office was opened in 2006. Other ethnic communities have been here for a very long time, so you cannot just compare us now to the Latino community because they've been here longer. So it takes time. It takes time.
But from what I remember, at least one very obvious shortcoming is that there's just not enough staff to be able to serve the community. Wasn't that
That's one of the things that were highlighted. The office has 2 full-time staff. Rely on interns, right? Other agencies have 8 to 9 Latino community. Yeah, there's a disparity. But someone who's worked there, I was the 3rd full-time staff, and I was able to see firsthand the impacts of that. I mean, there were times where I came to work on Saturdays to finish my work. But obviously, you can do more with more staff, but until you do have it, you just gotta do fine with what you have.
sure, of course. Okay.
Just gotta do fine with what you have.
And that is, or from what I heard from the testimony, that is one of the priorities. Actually, but was it last week the budget office came back with the final budgets last week, or has that been decided on yet?
Well, it's not a final budget until they vote on it, which is sometime next week. The
Okay,
committee
but the
makes recommendations.
Sure, of course.
The committee makes recommendation, and I think based on what I heard, they added enough money for 1 full-time staff.
For the applicant.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm not sure how true it is. I haven't confirmed it, but
Alright, yeah, I have to go back.
I've sort of read it through different emails.
Okay.
But the council has to vote on it,
Okay.
and the mayor has to sign it.
Okay. But okay, at the very least, one outcome is there could be
There could be,
one extra,
which is a good step.
which is good. I mean, it's literally, I mean, people ask for it.
No, it's
you
great.
know,
It's great.
and-
Last year, what we did was we asked for grant making authority, which we never had before. The council gave the office $100,000 for grant making
Yeah, that's what
authority.
I heard.
So now, if they give us more money for staff, I mean, we're doing good.
Yeah.
We're not doing great, but we're making progress.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. Okay,
progress.
but Sylvie told me that something about that last, so I just
Yeah.
need to go back and
Yeah.
see what.
$100,000 for grant making.
But no, it's great. So yeah, I'll kind of follow up on that when
Okay.
when they actually vote.
Okay.
But had some discussions with people who are fairly active and,
Okay.
and prominent in the diaspora community, but more so in terms of international policy and issues back home.
Okay.
And I've heard the arguments that, for us to lobby our governments here won't do anything. Or not won't do anything, but won't be as effective as this is specifically for affecting change back in home countries. But that lobbying national government here is less effective than going back home and trying to do something.
Lobbying what government? The U.S. government?
The U.S. government. So
It's less effective than...
going back home and trying to, make change or trying to lobby governments back home.
I don't agree with that.
Okay, what?
Only because we live here. I mean, I'm here 24/7. One of the problems with the African community is physically we are here, but mentally we are back home. But I think lobbying the government here is even more effective than doing it back home. Why? Because, again, we live here 24/7. Our kids go to school here. We pay our taxes here. U.S. policies affect us here directly. I mean, so many different things affect us here on a day-to-day basis. A decision that the president of Senegal takes in Senegal doesn't affect me personally, even though it may affect my family back home. But it doesn't affect me personally. So I'm not saying just lobby here and don't do anything back home. We have to do both. We have to lobby our government here, the U.S. government, so that they can pass policies like the DREAM Act, so those that came illegally can go to school, get a better education, get the skills in order to go back home and make a difference there. I mean, I see a lot of people here just going down to embassies, protesting, which is good, but just that is not enough. It has to come hand in hand with lobbying our government here as well.
And do you feel that there's been that the diaspora has been effective in really taking advantage of that at the national level at all?
some communities have. The Somalian community, I think they have. The Ethiopian community, they have. Because the U.S. government is very involved, not just here, but also back home, what's going on there. But again, it's not enough. I mean, we can't lobby as Nigerians alone. We can't lobby as Ghanaian. We have to lobby as Africans. We have to lobby as Africans so that when there's an issue in Mali, we can all pressure the government here to put pressure on people back home. But if we just lobby as Gambians, we're only a handful. It's not effective. And one of the things about lobbying is numbers. The numbers speak volume, in my opinion.
Okay. That is helpful.
Yep.
All right.
Cool.
Bye.